So let me start off by saying I can explain. Looks like they still have The Wicked King in stock at Barnes & Noble. Oh, that cover. I really shouldn't do that though. I'm on a book buying ban. I set down my phone and pick up my book and just not think about it because, you know.
Buy me!
Excuse me? Did you just say something?
Buy me!
Okay, that's freaking weird. Stop that. I'm on a book buying ban. Don't talk me out of it.
Buy me, bitch!
Whoa, that was totally uncalled for.
Sorry, but you know, if you wait, it will be too late to buy my beautiful, lovely self.
Okay. See, logic actually works a lot better in this situation. If you talk to me reasonably instead of cussing me out, I think we'll be fine. But you're right. Unfortunately, you're right. Goodbye, book buying ban. Hello, book. So that pretty much happened. Yeah, so that's exactly what happened. Basically, for the most part. It's a loose retelling. Okay, so I had less than adequate self-control this month. I did get my pre-orders. Some of these books, I actually ordered them before December because of the fact they had a really good book selection at Book Outlet, and I am a sucker for Book Outlet. I am super addicted to Book Outlet because of all the great deals they end up having pretty much every time I go on there. So I know that I was supposed to be on a book buying ban, but Book Outlet, and then emotions. And you know what? I should feel really bad about not fulfilling my book ban. But I feel like this is a work in progress because I feel like I've gotten in the habit of buying books and I need to try to break that habit the best I can. So far, February hasn't been much better, so there will be a book haul next month as well. So stay tuned for that. But I am still exercising control. There is not nearly as much coming out this month. The pre-orders were actually part of my book buying ban plan. But, you know, that's what happens sometimes because, you know, the good books come out and then you're just like, oh, I found a good deal. So let's just go ahead and get into it. This particular selection of books here that I have are books that I actually bought towards the end of December. And I was really, really excited to get into them because they had some books that I've been looking at for quite a while that I saw that they had on stock on there. It made me very excited. So the first set of books that I have is The Gospel of Loki and The Testament of Loki by Joanne M. Harris. I have seen a lot of things about these floating around. They're very short books, they're not big at all, but I've heard that this is a whole book from the perspective of Loki, and I happen to be a huge Loki Tom Hiddleston fan, so I'm guaranteeing you the entire time I am reading these I will be picturing his face. But overall, I have heard a lot of mixed reviews about these, so it'll be interesting to see what I actually think about these. So this is basically a narrative of the rise and fall of the Norse gods, completely told from Loki's perspective. Now, Loki is super witty, he's kind of sneaky sometimes, but he usually tends to be the brains of every outfit in the Norse mythology realm. I am very curious to see how this plays out. I noticed that these can be very polarizing books. Goodreads pretty much told me that in the way that they have been reviewed, that either you love these or you're not such a big fan. So I really want to see what end of the spectrum I end up falling into. The next book I got was Sense and Sensibility by Jane Austen. These are the plexi bound editions from Book Outlet. These are gorgeous. They have the little cloth bookmarks in them, which I just love cloth bookmarks, and I really love pink. So when I saw that they had these on there, because I love both the plexi bound, and usually the plexi bounds have these, even the Barnes & Noble plexi bounds have a little quote on the back, and this one is no exception. Yes, and the quote says, "It is not time or opportunity that is to determine intimacy. It is disposition alone. 7 years would be insufficient to make some people acquainted with each other, and 7 days are more than enough for others." Jane Austen has been a classic. I read Pride and Prejudice about 3 or 4 years ago, And I loved it. I loved the way it was written. I love how insightful and witty she was for the time period that she wrote these books, how independent her character is, and how it's shown through all of her writing. So when I saw this edition, I felt like this would go very, very well with all of my Barnes & Noble Plexi bound editions. So the next set of books that I got is The Waking Fire and The Legion of Flame. These are the first 2 books in a trilogy, and these are both by Anthony Ryan. These are books centered around dragons, and I don't really get a chance to read a ton of books centered around dragons. It says, throughout the vast lands controlled by the Iron Ship Trading Syndicate, nothing is more prized than the blood of drakes, which can bestow fearsome powers on the rare blood blessed. But not many know the truth, that the lines of drakes are weakening. If they fail, war with the neighboring Corvantian Empire will follow swiftly. The Syndicate's last hope resides in whispers of the existence of another, far more powerful breed of drakes, and few who have been chosen by fate to seek it: a petty thief, an unregistered blood-blessed, a formidable spy and assassin, and the second lieutenant of an iron ship cruiser. Anthony Ryan has gotten a really good reputation for making really amazing fantasy books, and this is part of the Draconis Memoria, and I thought that these sounded super amazing, and I'm very, very excited for these as well. Of course, I wouldn't be buying them if I wasn't excited, so maybe that's a little redundant, but I absolutely just get so fired up for new books, and being the fact that they were from Book Outlet, they were not that expensive at all. And I love the fact that these are also very floppy paperbacks. Floppy paperbacks, there's just something about them. They always sit very nicely open, and being the fact that the floppier they are, they don't usually damage the spine either. So it's nice to be able to have a book open all the way like this and not have to worry that the spine is going to get too beat up, because that's usually the part that you look at the most, and I kind of have a thing for not creasing my spines. So these were pretty much all the books that I got before I was supposed to officially be on my book buying ban. There's quite a few in here that are ones that I pre-ordered, which I'm really excited about because those are the new releases. And then there's some that I knew I was going to end up reading pretty much almost right away because I just got so excited and my self-control kind of went out the window. So the next book that I got is Stain by A.G. Howard. I'm not a huge fan of covers like this, with the faces and people and everything else. But I really didn't mind this one because the font is gorgeous and I love the purple surrounding it, and she just looks kind of haunted. This is actually supposed to be a Princess and the Pea retelling, and I heard a lot of buzz about it all over Goodreads, and it seems like a lot of people have been loving this book, and I haven't really heard too much about it aside from the fact that she is a mute princess. And I think that is just so fascinating in the world of literature, where a lot of the people get together and they talk, and that's how they build relationships. So we're going to be seeing a lot of showing in this, with her attitude, expressions, and everything else like that, versus her talking to people and you seeing her personality come through that. We're going to have to see it come through actions, pretty much solely through actions. So I'm really curious to see how this plays out. The second I heard it was about a mute princess, I got really intrigued to see how this was written. So if for nothing else, the Princess and the Pea retelling kind of hooked me, but when I read that it was about a mute princess, that's what really got me interested in this, and it got me really excited for it as well. So the next book that I have is The Wicker King by Kay Ancrum. And this is another one that I ended up purchasing on a whim because I wanted to read it right away as soon as I heard about what it was about. It's basically about these two boys named August and Jack. August is very close to Jack. They have grown up together. They've been friends forever. And the really interesting thing about this is that Jack is seeing things that he shouldn't see. Things that he says, oh, you don't see it? And of course, nobody else sees it but him. There are a couple kids at the school that are very concerned because their grandmother, who ended up seeing these things, they notice a similar pattern in Jack to their grandmother. And their grandmother is very violent, and she has very violent hallucinations that causes her to be very violent. That's the impression that I'm getting, but I don't think that's still the whole story. I'm only about a third of the way through this. So far, I'm not really sure how I feel about this, simply because it seems a little bit choppy so far. I'm hoping that'll get better. I'm hoping it'll feel more cohesive. I'm kind of thinking that maybe they're using that as a tool, because the thing about it is it's this whole debate between whether or not these hallucinations are actually a real thing and they're two worlds kind of crossing together, or if he's just having the hallucinations and they aren't realistic. And so it's kind of a mystery. We're not really to that point yet, like where we find out whether or not this is actually real or something that exists solely inside his head yet. But I'm very curious to find out, just because I love those stories like where one reality blends into another. I think they're very interesting, and when I heard about that, I knew I was going to end up reading this right away, so I ended up splurging on this too. But really excited about this one. And as much as I am not so far super excited about it, I'm very interested to see where this goes. So the next thing I'm going to move on to is all of the new releases that I got in the month of January, because January was just such a crazy month for new releases. They had so many new releases out this year that sounded so amazing. Last year, I remember January was kind of a slow month. Of course, we had First of the Unearthed duology that was coming out last year, which I also read. We also had The Cruel Prince that came out. We had a few others, but really, there was maybe about 3 or 4 books out in January of 2018 that were really interesting. This month, we had about 10 books that were really, really, really interesting that I was so excited to get to, and I'm still working my way through them. I managed to get to at least 3 of them at the beginning of February, which I will be talking about more in my February wrap-up at the end of this month. But I'm just going to go ahead and get into all the books, the new ones, the new releases that I got this month that I am super excited for. So this is A Curse So Dark and Lonely by Bridget Kemmer. She wrote Letters to the Lost, and this is a Beauty and the Beast retelling. And actually, what I didn't realize until after I already received it is that it's also in the first in a duology. The duology, I'm not really sure when the second book's coming out yet, but this was definitely a really good read. This is actually a fantasy contemporary, but I personally have not read a ton of fantasy contemporaries. But basically, with a fantasy contemporary, you have a lot of fantasy elements, but there's also a lot of things about this book that's rooted in actual fact. It's not too fantastical. It's not too intense on the fantasy. If you're somebody that really likes contemporary, then you will probably really like this because it's not super heavy on fantasy. It's definitely more rooted in facts. So you have our main character, Harper, who lives in Washington, D.C. Harper is actually in the middle of being the lookout for her brother who got involved in this crime family. After their father had deserted them, there was a big debt to be settled, and so Harper's older brother decided to work on trying to settle that debt for her family so that they would not be put in harm's way of this mobster family. In the middle of her watching, she sees this man trying to abduct this girl, and being the feisty person that she is, decides to try to defend this girl. Little does she know that this person that's trying to abduct this girl is actually from a parallel world to ours called Emberfall, and is taking it back to Ren, who is the prince and is cursed with becoming a beast every season. Harper actually has cerebral palsy, which causes her to limp. And so she's not like the cliche princess that you would think being, like the perfect princess. She does have her flaws. And those little flaws, those little details, and the representation they had for cerebral palsy, which I personally have not seen a ton in literature, I really liked that. It really grounded her as being a real person. She wasn't just this cliche princess that was just perfect in every way. She had her flaws, and I love the fact that added another extra layer of realism to everything that was going on. When she gets taken back to Emberfall, she is very feisty. Prince Ren has no idea what to do with this. He was expecting her to be unconscious like most of the girls are when they bring them back for the season. But little does Harper know, this is going to be the final season that Ren tries to get a girl to fall in love with him. He's been doing this for hundreds of seasons and finally begs the Enchantress to let him rest. But the trick to this is, being the person that the Enchantress is, once the season's ended, he's not going to die. He's going to become a beast for the rest of the days. And the beast in this book takes multiple forms. It's not just like a big hairy guy with horns. Another thing too is that they also reference Stockholm Syndrome, which I adored that, because you never really hear, at least any of the ones that I've read, I personally have never heard them reference Stockholm Syndrome in a Beauty and the Beast retelling. And that just made it so much more interesting, because she was very aware of her surroundings, and I just loved the character in general. So next books that we will be talking about is actually the same book, but I have 2 different editions of it, because after I thought about it for a while, this was the perpetrator that made me break my book ban. We have the Barnes & Noble edition of The Wicked King, which has this beautiful black cover, and then we also have the standard edition of The Wicked King. Now, what's interesting about these is that this is a black cover, but underneath, what's interesting about this is that it's white underneath. And we have this crown that kind of looks like it's floating in seaweed. That's what it looks like to me. And then, of course, like this has a white cover, and underneath this one has the black crown that looks like it's floating in seaweed. And I'm kind of kicking myself because I never got the Cruel Prince, the first one in the Barnes & Noble edition. I kind of wish I did now, because I actually really love these black dust jackets. And I was so concerned that by the time I got around to not having my book ban anymore, that these would no longer be in stock. So I kind of messed up there too, but I wish I felt worse about it, because I don't. There's no guilt here. I was so excited when I got this. I actually did an unboxing of this on my Instagram page, which the link for that is down below if you're interested. And I was so excited. The Wicked King is actually the second book in the Cruel Prince trilogy. And this is all about a mortal named Jude, who is taken to Fairy after her stepfather comes in and murders her biological mother for leaving him when he was in Fairy. Jude's biological mother goes and gets a husband, and so when Jude's stepfather comes in, he sees everything, he kills her parents, and then he takes her and her siblings back to Fairy with her. Jude's older sister is actually half fairy, half human, so her older sister is actually her half sister, and her stepdad is actually Jude's father, not the parents that she grew up around. But she never really realized that. Fairy was kind of kept hidden from them after their mother got back. So this was kind of a big culture shock for her. The fairies in this world are very cruel to them because they are mortals. And so they like to pick on them. They like to enchant them. They like to make sure that they are made fun of. They make them feel inferior. There's so many bad things that these fairies do to Jude, but Jude is determined to carve out a place for herself to make sure that she stands distinct and make sure that she has a place in this world. There's a lot of angstiness between Carden, who is a fairy, and he's a very cruel fairy. He's like one of the ones that she hates the most, that she gets bullied by the most. And there's a lot of chemistry between Jude and Carden, and I love all of that. And there's a lot of politics. These are really amazing books. I mean, if you like fairies at all, or if you like political intrigue, you'll never see the endings of these coming, and I love little twists that they throw in because they are just so fascinating. So the next book that I got is The Gilded Wolves by Roshni Chokshi. I was actually on the fence about this, but I started seeing a lot of people give this really positive reviews, so I was pretty sold. I'm just like, well, if so many people love this book, I mean, we'll see how I like it. But I mean, this is pretty much set in 1886 Paris. And it's all about, it's got mystery, it's got intrigue. Honestly, I'm not super sure exactly what this is about in depth. I read the synopsis, which I don't typically do, and I'm still kind of trying to figure out exactly the overall pretense, besides the fact that there's a mystery and there's an engineer and a scientist and a bunch of other people that come together to solve this mystery that is in Paris in the 1800s. So other than that, I mean, I'm really intrigued, but I do also want to talk about this cover really quick because there have been so many beautiful covers. January of 2019 should be known as the time when all of these covers, these beautiful covers came out. January 2019 was the time of covers. Okay, because not only is this beautiful, I mean, we got the beauty of The Wicked King, we got the beauty of A Curse So Dark and Lonely. I mean, there's so much. And then, to boot, guys, the big release, one of the really big releases of January of 2019. And this one also had a beautiful cover. King of Scars by Leigh Bardugo, which is the next book that I got. I have been really excited about this because this is about Nikolai, who is from the Shadow and Bone trilogy, and I absolutely fell in love with him. He was my main man in that series, and I absolutely adored him. This is the first in a duology. This is the long-awaited King of Scars by Leigh Bardugo, and it's just phenomenal. I'm so excited. I have not had a chance to read this yet because I still have to read the duology for Six of Crows and the Crooked Kingdom, which I'm planning on doing at the end of February, so hopefully I won't run into too many spoilers. Speaking of beautiful covers, again, guys, seriously, what is going on here? There's nothing on the back, but I mean, seriously, guys, that spine and that front. This January 2019 was the month for beautiful books, and I cannot say that enough because there are so many beautiful ones. So the next book that I got is The Undying. This is the sequel to the Unearthed trilogy, which is by Amy Kaufman and Megan Spooner. This has been said to be a cross between like a science fiction and Indiana Jones, and it's told but with Mia and Jules. Jules is this very scholarly kid who comes to this planet to seek information about the Undying, and he wants to know more about them. So he's on this planet trying to figure out everything about the Undying. Well, he's got very little street smarts. He's very book learned. Fortunately enough for him, he meets Mia, who's been trying to survive on this planet and get rich quick because she needs the money for her family. Fate pulls them together. There's a little bit of a romance between them, which I really like, and this is the sequel and the final book installment in the duology for the Unearthed duology. And I have to say like that the first book wasn't my absolute 100% favorite book that I read in the month of January last year, but I really want to see where they're going to take this. I really feel like I want to follow it through and see how the duology ends so that I can really see how I really actually feel about it. The first book was like all a setup. It was all set up, setting everything up, it felt like, for this book to come. And so I think one of the reasons like why I probably wasn't as eager about that whole book as I will be about this one is because I don't feel like we really got into a ton of action. Like there was some, but like it didn't really have to do like with anything like with, like any of the science fiction portion of it. It was a lot more to do with technology and the people on the planet trying to hunt for this same relic that was in this ancient monument that was actually created by the Undying. So that's pretty much the majority of what that first book covers, and I feel like this is going to go into depth of all of the really wonderful things that we expected to see in the Unearthed book that I never got. So I'm really excited to get to this. So the next book that I got is The Dragon Pearl by Yoon Ha Lee, which is actually a Rick Riordan Presents book. This is a Korean space opera. It's got a lot of Korean mythology interlaced into it, and I really don't know anything about Korean mythology, but they usually do like a really decent job like in his books on setting everything up for us to learn more about these cultures. And I love the fact that they are getting so diverse with everything. I mean, we have a Mayan culture now, we have an Indian, we have all the original like ones that Rick Riordan did, which mainly is Greek and Roman mythology and Norse mythology and everything else, but it's really awesome to see them branching out, and this just looks really, really interesting. So the next book is by Christian White and is called Slayer. This takes place in the same universe as Buffy the Vampire Slayer. During the time that this book takes place, instead of having one Slayer, you have a situation where a ton of Slayers are actually activated, and then instead of having a chosen one, you have chosen lots. So this takes place around the character Nina. Nina's life is changed forever when she's picked as a Slayer. According to what the synopsis says, she's going to be the last Slayer ever. I'm kind of curious where this goes because they do actually mention Buffy the Vampire Slayer in this book. Basically, Nina's father died protecting Buffy the Vampire Slayer, who is an infamous Slayer in this world, which of course, we wouldn't even know about this world if it wasn't for Buffy the Vampire Slayer. But this was another one that was really intriguing to me. I read Christian White's The Dark Descent of Elizabeth Frankenstein in October, I believe, and I really, really loved it. I loved how well fleshed out it was, and so I am looking forward to this. This is actually book one in a series, and I cannot wait to see what she does with this. So the next book that I bought is The Cerulean by Amy Ewing. Look at that cover. While I don't do a ton of cover buys, this was a partial cover buy, but it also sounds like a fantastic idea as well. The Cerulean actually live in the sky. This takes place around our main character, Sierra, who never has really felt quite like she belonged to anywhere among her people. Being a devout person who loves this culture, her people, and everything else, one day they decide that she is picked as a sacrifice, and she ends up having to throw herself over the edge of the city as a sacrifice, which really kind of disrupts her view of the people that she loves but doesn't quite feel she belongs with. Something odd happens though. When she throws herself over the side, she doesn't actually die. She ends up on the planet where she is surrounded by humans that she's only heard stories about. But something also happens simultaneously, like while she's trying to navigate the human world with the Ceruleans. Something happens with the Ceruleans and she has to hurry up and find her way home before it all plays out. So this actually does sound really interesting. I have been hearing kind of mixed things about this as well. I'm not really sure how it's going to go. I hear like that the idea is really interesting, but it's kind of poorly executed. So I'm kind of curious to see how I feel about this as well. I mean, this might be a polarizing read for some people. That's what I'm wondering. I mean, you know, or maybe it's just, I don't know, maybe it's good, maybe it's not good. We'll find out, right? So the next book is The Fever King by Victoria Lee. I want to say that this is another, once again, the month of extremely gorgeous covers. It is all on the back, it is on the front. This is just a gorgeous book, honestly. So this takes place around Naomi Alvaro, and she wakes up from this mysterious fever magic that makes her into a technopath, which gives her the ability to control technology. So they pretty much had me at technopath. Like, I'm really interested in that. This is another thing like that I haven't like read a ton about, like technopaths. And I'm really curious to see how that plays out. When I heard about the premise for it, it just made me very excited because it's just so different. It's kind of like a science fiction, but it's also like a fantasy. And I love the combination of science fiction and fantasy. So, very excited. Okay, the next new release is In an Absent Dream by Sheena McGuire. This is the 4th book in the Wayward Children series. I've already read it. I read it towards the beginning. No, I read it in January because I was very excited for this. I love these books so much. These books are all about these kids that go to this home for wayward children after going to these portals that have led them to other places, and then they come back here and they're having trouble adjusting. So there's this home for all these kids that feel like they can belong to all these people that feel like they don't belong because they have been in other places. It gives them an outlet, gives them a place to talk about these other places that they've been to. And so this is a portal fantasy, much like Narnia, which is also a portal fantasy, and it is just really, really interesting. This takes place around Lundy, who's a very, very serious girl. This is a much more structured world than the other 3 books. In the first book, you have the introduction of the kids in the home for wayward children, and you get to meet a wide variety of kids, and you get to hear about a wide variety of worlds, and you really don't actually get a super big glimpse into the world. You just get a glimpse into what happens to the kids after they return back to reality. The second book is Down Among the Sticks and Bones, which took place in a very chaotic world, very dark. There was a vampire. And then the third book was also kind of chaos-based as well, but it took place in a very happy world, like where there was a ton of, you know, candy and just happiness and everything else. So there was 2 totally different extremes. This is another definitely big different extreme because this takes place in a world where fairness is everything. Fairness is currency. Fairness is life. And so it's extremely structured. And if you would like to hear more about how I felt about this book, I will leave my link for my January wrap up in this because I did have a few things to say about it. So if you were interested in hearing about my review, check it out. So I'm getting to the end of this. There are just a few more books that I want to talk about because I ended up doing another book outlet order because I found more books that I really, really, really wanted that I got really excited about. And, you know, with Book Outlet, I mean, no matter how many they have, you never really know how quickly they're going to sell out of their books. I broke down and I ended up buying a few more. So the next book that I got from Book Outlet was Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. This is part of the Puffin in Bloom collection, and I really love these. I have 3 out of the 4. I'm only now just missing Heidi, and I really just love how these look. I mean, the writing is actually like really good size. I'm not a fan of small writing. I don't like small writing. I don't care how big the book is. I want writing that I can actually read. So I do love these editions so much. The next book is actually a nonfiction. It's The Soul of the Octopus by Cy Montgomery. This actually describes consciousness using an octopus. And being the fact that I am very interested in consciousness, I really like psychology. I actually do have a degree in psychology. And so it's always been something that I've been very, very interested on. But I don't know like if this book is going to swing like more on the psychological or more on the scientific. I'm thinking it's going to go more on the scientific just because of the contents of it and how like they're comparing consciousness to an octopus and not to human consciousness. But I mean like they're studying it through the octopus. So I'm thinking like that it might be a mixture of both. I'm hoping it's a mixture of both, but I don't mind either or if they happen to go one way or the other with it. So the next book was a book that I have been thinking a lot about recently just because like the next book's getting ready to come out for the series, and I'm not really sure how I'm going to feel about this one either. This was another like one that I was kind of on the fence with, but I just decided to go ahead and get it because I had to get at least $35 worth of books in order to get free shipping. So I ended up getting The Queen's Rising. So this takes place around Brianna, who's two things that she's really interested in. She has her passion that she really wants to pursue, and then she is also seeking a patron. I didn't really get a clear distinction of what exactly her passion was, but I know that this has a ton of world building. For a YA book, I heard that this is very kind of info dumpy, but I'm hoping that I really enjoy this. This was like another like one that I wasn't really sure I was gonna love, but we'll see how I feel about it after I get done reading it. This next book was the main reason I did this next book order from Book Outlet, because they didn't really have a ton of them in stock, and it was Summer of Salt by Katrina Leno. Actually, Chelsea over at Chelsea Doling's Read actually mentioned on Twitter that they were having a sale on these, and I would been really seriously considering ordering it because this is magical realism. Chelsea Doling at Chelsea Doling Reads loves this book, and it's kind of a magical realism. This takes place like around this main character, Georgia. Her sister is able to defy gravity, and she's been kind of fretting over like the fact that her magical powers have not surfaced yet. This has a bird like that comes and roosts like in the little island that they live on. Like the bird's 300 years old. There's like a lot of, it sounds like there's like a lot of history here, and it's all about the main character trying to like learn like about what magic really is and what it really means. This kind of sounds like a personal growth story, and I was really fascinated by this, by the premise of it. And being the fact that it's gotten so many good reviews, I cannot wait to read this. So lately, especially after I finished the first two books in the Mistborn trilogy, I have been all about finding books, at least like, you know, like especially books that I feel like I'm going to end up really loving, because I want to have my first reaction to them. But then you have the collector's editions and you don't like want to highlight in them, and you don't like want to tab them, and you just like want to keep them really pretty and perfect forever. And you know, it's not the fact that you won't ever read them, it's the fact that, you know, like you don't really feel like you can actually like destroy them, because, you know, I mean, and by destroy, I mean like highlight and annotate and everything else. I ended up picking up Strange the Dreamer in the US hardback because they had it for like $6, I want to say, and I feel like this is going to be one of those books that I'm going to really love, and I'm going to be able to dig into like to this particular book, and I'll be able to highlight it and tab it up as much as I want to, and not have to even worry about it. And I've actually been doing like that with all of my Mistborn books. I am hoping to start the Stormlight Archive soon, get into those as well by Brandon Sanderson, and I already have those books because I have a few collector's editions of those, but I also have a couple paperbacks that I know I'm going to be able to highlight and tab and everything else. I mean, this is going to be my tabbed, destroyed book by the time I'm done with it. This is very fantastical. It takes place about this guy named Laszlo Strange, who is an expert at the city of Weep, and he gets recruited by like these people who are searching for the lost city of Weep as their expert because he's been studying it for such a long time that he knows so much about it. And so he goes and he finds this lost city of Weep, and there's all this fantastical people there, and it's just like this whole like thing, and I've heard so many good things about it that I'm really excited to get to this. These are actually like really towards the top of my TBR like this year. I am planning on trying to get to as many series as possible this year. My goal is to read at least one trilogy or duology a month as I've been going, so I am very excited to get into this. Well guys, that pretty much ends my book haul, and I hope you guys enjoyed this one. I had a really good time not meeting my goals this month. I had a little bit too good of a time, and do I feel guilty? Not in the slightest, because I've got new books to read. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you guys like this video, hit the little like, hit subscribe, and hit the little bell icon if you want to receive emails every time I post. Also, I am on Instagram, Twitter, Amazon, and Goodreads. All of those links are in the discussion below. So if you guys want to connect with me on any of my other social media, please do. I would love to talk to you. I'd love to chat with you. As always, thank you so much for joining me. Thank you guys so much for watching my video, and I will see you guys again very soon.